in coming to terms with our individual patterns of addiction, we may have felt somewhat buoyed initially by the fact that in SLA each person defines his or own particular manifestation of sex and love addiction. This led many of us to the private conclusion that we could define our patterns in ways that would let us enjoy our addiction in another form. It would be sufficient, we thought, to label only the obvious troublesome behaviour as addictive, and unnecessary to include other courses on the menu. If, for example, we claimed that our bottom line addiction was engaging in exhibitionism behaviour, then in defining our pattern only as this specific practice, we might kid ourselves that new paid-for sex liaisons actually were not part of our addictive pattern. We would claim that such novelty actually was a step forward, because we were no longer engaging in purely solitary acts. The opposite was true for those of us who labelled only blatant promiscuity behaviour as addictive. We would engage in such solitary activities as masturbation, voyeurism and exhibitionism, and claim that they were improvements because we were no longer involving others directly in our disease. Such attempts were as futile as for an alcoholic to switch from beer to wine, claiming either is an improvement over the other. Those of us who tried to deceive ourselves in the way we defined our sex and love addiction either found ourselves slipping back into the old behaviour or getting into real trouble with our new steps forward. We learned the hard way that there was no such thing as half surrender. The freedom to define our own addictive pattern could not be used in a self-serving way. Our addictions are reality that persists regardless of any short-sighted, convenient definition. If we were leaving out of our personal definition some behaviour that was addictive, it would certainly pull us back into the pattern again. The certain pain of continuing our sex and love addiction brought us to the admission of step 1. That's powerless. We were powerless over our sex and love addiction, and that we could not manage our lives unless we were free of it. Finally, we reached a point of surrender unconditionally. The proof that our surrender was indeed unconditional was that we now refrained one day at a time from every form of bottom line behaviour we saw as part of our addictive pattern. Honestly, if our primary addictive problem was obsessive love dependency, we separated from and severed ties with our partners. This was not done to punish ourselves or others, but out of recognition that these were no-win situations. Many of us suspected or realised that we would need an indefinite period alone in which to learn and understand and deal with our disease. Distractions through some form of sex and love relationship could only abort our recovery. If we had just been jilted by someone we felt was indispensable, surrender meant that we accepted our loss and refused to take revenge or recriminate. It also meant that perhaps for the first time in our lives, we were not going to relieve our wounded feelings in another person's arms. Each of us, regardless of individual circumstances, was now willing to go to any lengths. Are you willing to go to any lengths, one day at a time, to be unhooked, to stay unhooked? This decision was unilateral. It did not depend on the cooperation or lack of cooperation of spouses, lovers, or sex objects at all. We were willing to be available not to the next lover or new sexual fantasy, but to whatever might happen next within ourselves. Paradoxically, this was This was not willingness that came from strength, but from the certainty of the dire consequences of continuing in our addiction. As we turned from old patterns, the painful emotions we had always tried to evade brought us to a series of insights which were the gift of the second step. And that was step 1 of SLA out of the handbook. You can get a copy if you go to meetings and they have the books there. You could probably order them online maybe. But I'm just really happy to read that out to you, and I don't feel so alone, because at the moment I'm not feeling real great and I'm very depressed and grieving, and I found out my dad died, and it's just brought back everything, and then I just think about my ex-boyfriend a lot, and I'm trying not to. It's very hard not to, but you try not to think of the good times, but that's all you seem to want to think back on. But really there was way more bad times than good, and it was never going to work in the first place. Like it said in that step, it wasn't going to work in the first place because I hadn't had time to myself after my divorce at all. Jumped straight into a relationship and I went mental, completely insane, mental. I probably still am, but a day at a time I'm getting recovery, I'm getting better slowly with meditation, with my daily readings. I'm a very spiritual person. I do a lot of spiritual stuff like the meditation. I talk to my higher power, and I just have a lot of faith that it's got to be better than being in that suffering of that relationship that I was in, which was absolutely abusive and neglectful and rejection. I got rejection a lot, and I hurt him a lot too, and it was just, we did not get on at all, and it was just all about the sex, and even in the end we didn't even do that much, and I was very hurt that in the end there was a lot of for a couple of years at the end he was ignoring me and trying to get away from me, and then just telling me he loves me as well, and just had a lot of mixed messages and confusing. And then when we had sex it felt like everything was okay, but then it really didn't, because I felt really mental afterwards, that I felt used, and that was very unhealthy for me. And then he kept on ignoring me and not ringing me, and he was on pot, so he was on that a lot. A lot. And he'd sleep for like nearly 2 days and stuff, and wouldn't ring me and for days, and it just was ridiculous. It was so painful. It was painful as relationship, and love is not like that. That was not love, and I thought I was in love with him. I was obsessed with him. I was obsessed with the pain of a relationship. I was addicted to the pain. I was addicted to the drama. These women that stay with these men for so long, and people say, why don't you leave and all that, but they're addicted to the drama. They're addicted to the abuse, and that's hard to believe, but it's true, because I was. And I know that I was addicted to abuse. And the fact is that you don't want to be alone, because the pain of being alone just seems worse. But if you do this recovery, if you do this slow recovery and get help and get friends and get numbers and reach out and just be honest, you will get help. I'm having a bad day today, but I just found out my dad died. Of course I'm going to be grieving, and that's normal, but you can get through these things, and you don't have to be alone with it. Now, when I was with this guy, I didn't have friends. I isolated myself, but I chose to do that. And even though I tried to have friends sometimes, he didn't want that. He didn't like that at all. He would be against me having friends or telling anyone anything, and it was just controlling. He was a lot younger than me, but he was a very controlling man. He was a boy, actually. And I just feel so sorry for him, you know. I feel more sorry for myself, but I always also was the people pleaser, because I just put my own feelings behind, you know, him, and I put him first all the time, and I just thought about him all the time, constantly obsessed, you know, with this man, and he didn't even care about me, really. You know, he said he did. He said he cared about me and loved me, and then it was just mental, really. And all I was in love with, all I was obsessed with, was what I thought he could have been. He wasn't. He was not what I thought he was. In fact, I knew a long time, you know, when we were together for a couple of years, I knew that he was not a good person. He had a lot of problems and issues, and he had a lot of lovingness about him and good points, but, you know, he had a lot of issues, and, you know, I just thought that maybe I could help him with that, to overcome it, but he always kept going back to his friends and smoking pot and doing what he was doing, and just being secretive all the time, and caught him out lying so many times, and it hurt me so much. I couldn't believe how hurt you could be, you know, by someone else, like, but over and over, like, keep going back for more is just insane, you know. And that's step 2, you know, we're insane. I can't see it, but we are insane, and we need to be. This thing will kill you, like, it will kill you. It nearly killed me. I nearly killed myself. I was cutting myself. I just had mental issues. You know, I was developing different personalities and mental problems. You know, I was, and I had mental blanks. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't do anything because of the obsession. And hang on. I've got to check something. I'll be back.